hello, friends, and welcome to a very special edition of the Happy Half Hour. Very special because we are, of course, at the Combine in Indianapolis. Love
Best
Indianapolis.
week of the year.
Love Indianapolis. It's just like Charlotte, except with worse weather and better basketball. Other than that, everything about this place is awesome, and we love it here.
Yes, it's so much fun. It's what do people call it? NFL spring break. That makes it sound a little more debauchery than it really is.
Although there's some debauching going on out there in them streets.
Yeah, that's how Darin's
and hateful gossip take over after midnight. And
didn't someone get on to you yesterday for being self-righteous?
Yeah, condescending and self-righteous because I didn't poison my mind, body, and spirit the way some of y'all did. No,
I was having Bible study. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of Bible study going on here this week. No, it is in all seriousness. This is the NFL's trade show. This is where everybody comes together. It's a convention. All the coaches, all the scouts, and all the players in this year's draft class are here right now. So it's a big old intelligence gathering operation. It's a big old, festival of all things football.
Right.
The on-field workouts get all the attention later in the week. That's the better television inventory. But really, the important stuff that happens here is the medical profiles that the players go through and the meetings with teams.
Between the meetings with teams for the prospects, I mean, you've got a free agency window opening here soon, and you've got teams figuring out their own free agents.
Yep.
This is kind of, to quote Hamilton, this is the room where it happened pretty much all week.
No doubt.
A lot of what happens in each football year is decided kind of in Indianapolis each year.
And I will, right out of the top of this podcast, address one of my pet peeves in life.
Oh, can't wait to hear this.
When the players are up on podiums, they're on podiums but behind lecterns, remember.
But they are on a podium.
Right. They are on a podium. A podium is a thing you are upon. A lectern is a thing you are behind. That's the easiest way to remember it. But when the players are up on the podiums, people will ask them, the reporters from all over the place are here, and reporters will say, have you met with the Lions today? Have you met with the Buccaneers today? If you're a first-round prospect, you meet with everybody.
Right.
So the process of elimination that occurs, well, you had an informal meeting with the Packers, but not a formal meeting.
Right.
What does it mean? It doesn't mean anything.
And
Stop asking that question, reporters. My God. And
we should run Darin Gantt's School of Journalism with the
There is a saint among us. Justin Rogers of the Detroit News is walking around this morning wearing a sweatshirt that says, have you talked to team I cover?
That's hilarious.
It's amazing. I documented it on the Twitter earlier today. He is a god of journalism today, and I salute him. But, I mean, it is silly because here's the secret. You know who the Carolina Panthers are going to talk to? A whole bunch of defensive players. That's who, because that's what they need the most, because that's what Dan Morgan said they needed the most yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't shy about it. He didn't dance away from it. He said, I think it's pretty obvious the defensive side of the ball is where we're going to have to put a lot of our focus in both free agency and the draft. And, that was kind of the offense at this point last year. Mm-hmm. We saw them fill the holes. We saw the step that was taken by focusing on those areas, especially the offensive line. And Dan said, you're going to have to still win this league in the trenches, like on the lines. And same way they addressed the offensive line that last year, that's what they're going to do to the front seven this year. Luckily for them, this draft plays right into their hands.
Sure.
One of the deeper front seven classes I can remember in a while.
It really is. And when there's a lot of pass rushers and when there's a lot of interior defensive linemen, that's going to get their attention throughout.
Right.
And I think there's a decent chance, without getting too deep into draft strategy, that they're going to take a couple of them.
Yeah.
We'll see. Free agency is going to inform that. Once that starts in 2 weeks from today, I guess. Yeah, 2 weeks from today, free agency begins in earnest. And even 2 days prior to that, the negotiation period where we'll kind of know without knowing. That'll inform some of the draft plans, but the way this thing's set up, seeing them double up on pass rushers, seeing them double up on defensive tackles makes a lot of sense because that's where the biggest need is. I mean, even Dave Canales said it yesterday, and I'm sure we've got the video clip. Podcast Matt can take care of that for us. I mean, Canales said stopping the run is the priority.
Right.
Well, yeah, you average 200 yards a game, 200 rushing yards a game allowed over the last 9 games, and over 200 rushing yards allowed in each of the last 6. So, yeah, of course that's a problem, and it's something they've got to get addressed.
I'm sorry. You've got to be able to stop the run to even rush the passer anyways.
No doubt.
Those two things go hand in hand. They're part and parcel together.
Yep.
You can't do one, you're for sure not going to be able to do the second. And that's why it's so vital to find these guys that can kind of shuffle around. I mean, you look at a guy like Jalen Walker he's technically listed as a linebacker. I don't know what he is. I don't think he knows what he is either. But you find guys like that can kind of move around. I mean, you're not going to put Jalen Walker with a hand in the ground at the defensive tackle position. Right. But you've got guys that can move around that front 7, and that can help you both stop the run and rush the passer because you've got to be able to do both of those things to win. I mean, the Eagles were a perfect blueprint for that this year.
Yeah. I love the way Dan's like, I didn't need to see the Eagles in the Super Bowl to know that we needed to do this. So, as it pertains to Jalen Walker and his not being, well-defined, because we've seen a recent example of a similar type of player, I mean, it's kind of Frankie Louvu. And Frankie was the high-energy guy who brought it from wherever he happened to be. He's standing up. He's coming off the edge. He's doing a lot of different things. I think Walker's got a little bit of that in him, but we'll have time to get into the particulars of all these guys over the next month and a half, 2 months, as we go through this process. But we were just walking that room this morning where they were doing interviews, and it's left and right. And, here's Michael Williams. Here's, here's James Pierce from Charlotte's Chambers High.
Abdul Carter.
Stay tuned to Panthers.com to read more about James later on today. The lot of them, Abdul Carter, all of them, Mike Green. It's an incredibly deep class, and the chances of coming out of the 8th pick with one of them are decent. We don't know who it's going to be or that they're absolutely going to use a first-round pick on that particular position. It just makes a lot of sense considering their need and where this draft stacks up.
And you can also – I don't want to get too deep into this because I don't want people to think this is what's going to happen. It's just something to still consider. They've got enough draft capital and are in a right spot and knowing the positions they need with the deep class to possibly still move around.
No doubt.
And we saw last year Dan Morgan is happy to move around if he feels like he's going to get a better deal.
Yeah.
And so when you're sitting there at number 8 and you're looking at how deep this pass rusher class is, Dan said on Tuesday that he had not necessarily had any conversations yet about giving up that spot, but I wouldn't be surprised if those conversations happen.
And I feel like I should raise my hand and say the opinions of the Happy Half Hour
right. Do not reflect those of the Carolina Panthers
Darin
brass.
and Kassidy only, and do not reflect the opinions of Dan Morgan, Brandt Tilis, or the rest of the Carolina Panthers front office. This is just us talking. But the other thing that makes you think they might do that, they have done that.
Right.
I mean, if you look back to last year's draft and moving, out of 39 to get the second-round pick this year back, then moving back up to take Jonathan Brooks. I mean, it's just they've shown that they're willing to go up and down the board. So I think it's reasonable to expect that could happen again this year when they're sitting there with 9 total picks, 8 in the first 5 rounds.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good spot to be in. You can kind of choose your own destiny. Like, choose your own ending. Do you ever play those games growing up?
A little bit, yeah.
Like the Clue?
I had the book where it was actually a little paperback book, and you would flip from page 48 to 162. Yes. Yeah, you died.
Wow.
Why did you go behind that door? It was a terrible idea.
Right.
At any rate, no, we spent a lot of yesterday with Dave Canales and Dan Morgan, and he obviously, as we said, Dan talked a lot about the defense. The other thing that stood out to me is how casually Dan talks about the offensive line and keeping it the way he has it right now. I mean, he just very casually said, yeah, we want to bring back Austin Corbett and Cade Mays to play center. And that was kind of an open question, going into these last 2 weeks prior to free agency. But he very casually said, yeah, we want to keep both those guys. The question about Taylor Moton and his $31 million cap number came up, and he's like, yeah, we're good. We can handle that number. We want Taylor to be here. Somebody asked him about Ike Ekwonu and what do you do contractually with him, knowing they've got to make a decision on a 5th-year option. He said, we're going to try to extend it before we get to that point. And it's just like very casually, very matter of fact, and that's just how Dan Morgan talks. But they know they've found something in that offensive line. It became part of the personality of the team last year, enabled Bryce to flourish in the second half of the season, and they're going to make sure they hang on to that. They're going to make sure that strength stays strong. And,
I guess this is the case with every position, every unit, but you really see it with the offensive line. is how much that unit is predicated on chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have a left tackle and a left guard that know how the other moves, that's what leaves holes wide open to cause sacks.
Yep.
And you've got a unit that knows each other and that knows each other well enough that, if someone gets hurt or someone else has to go in, they're still fine.
Right.
And you don't break that up because that's, again, to Dan's point, that's where you can win or lose a game.
No doubt. And it takes more than 5 of them. And that's why, he kind of mentioned Austin and Cade as a unit almost, because Austin started the first 5 games before he tears his biceps. Cade comes in, brings him back off the Giants practice squad because there wasn't room for Cade Mays in September. That's how deep the Carolina Panthers offensive line was. When's the last time we said that?
Right.
And Cade ends up starting the last 8 games of the year. So they've got a bunch of people who can play a lot of roles. Chandler Zavala stepped in and started a couple games on both sides last year when guys were missing. So they've got a good group of people. Brady Christensen's a free agent. I think the anticipation is Brady's going to go look around, and somebody's probably going to find him starting caliber money to be a starting caliber player. He was sort of that 6th man last year. He's got great versatility. He could play left tackle. He started at guard before and was playing a decent center for a couple weeks there in between until, somebody else got hurt, and when Icky got hurt, he had to kick back out to left tackle. So I think Brady might have played his way out of Charlotte in some senses, but they've talked about being open to bringing him back. That one's going to be one the market dictates, but it takes more
there's
than 5 guys. There's going to be a few of those. Yeah, there's going to be a couple of those. So, yeah, speaking of guys, Dan was amazingly
wildly open about.
Yeah, he all but said, yeah, Johnny Hecker, love to have you back. Mm-hmm. Kicker, Eddie's going to test the market, and we're actively looking for a kicker. So I think you can kind of read between the lines on that one pretty easily. But, if there's going to be a new kicker in here and Johnny is back, then that new kicker comes in with the benefit of a veteran long snapper in J.J. Jansen. Mm-hmm. Perhaps you saw Cart Talk.
I did. I saw, recently. And it was a nice little crossover episode with Ask the Old Guy. Yeah. The highly anticipated Cart Talk episode was how I saw it worded.
Highly anticipated because we've been talking about doing this for 2 years, and we just got around to it. But it was cool. And but having JJ and Johnny will be a good security zone for any new kicker who walks in because not having to worry about the snap, the hold, makes his job easier. All he's got to do is kick.
JJ and Johnny also just sounds like a great buddy cop movie. And
it really is.
Yeah.
It
is in real life.
They really are. They went in depth, and we alluded to this on Cart Talk the other day, but I wrote about 1,000-word section of a mailbag a couple years ago about their process for determining coin flip decisions.
Okay.
And they would go out 90 minutes before kickoff and flip a snack waffle that they eat for energy before the game. Their brand has not paid us for this plug, so I will not describe it any further, but they would flip the snack waffle. If it landed tails, they would call tails, and they won 6 in a row that way.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was pretty impressive. But I said it was like a Paul Harvey bit, the rest of the story.
Yeah.
Is that a reference you understand?
And that's the rest.
You do. Yeah. Good for you. Hey, an old person reference that Kassidy gets. I'm feeling better about this already. But, they went through the whole thing. And, you wrote a story, too, about the anticipation a lot of people have about wide receiver being high on the shopping list this year. But Dave Canales said, maybe not.
Right. They're not necessarily in a position where it has to be.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those where if there's a guy there that's great and you've got maybe some of your other stuff taken care of, then, I don't know if that's their first priority. It sounds like defense is going to be that first priority.
No doubt.
Again, if you're sitting there at 8 and you've got a guy like, I think it's the McMillan kid or maybe, but they don't have to have one. Mm-hmm. And I think people see the Deontay Johnson trade as, now there's a hole open for a number 1 receiver.
Right.
And that's because you look at, Legette kind of went through some of those rookie growing pains.
Mm-hmm.
That's just part of it. Whatever happened his rookie year is only going to make him better his second year.
Mm-hmm.
You have a return of Adam Thielen, which is huge. I think Dan called him old reliable yesterday, which I really want on a T-shirt. I want it to look like a Yellowstone Old Faithful poster, like an old travel poster. But instead of a park ranger, it's Adam Thielen. That's somebody.
But it would have to be a park ranger with a ball cap on backwards.
Yes, and a cup of coffee.
And maybe no shoes on. Because that's how Adam wanders around the stadium all the time.
But having Thielen back, that's huge.
Yeah.
Like I said, you're going to see a lot of these guys kind of take a step forward. You got something for nothing out of Jalen Coker.
Mm-hmm.
And, so that kind of takes care of a lot of stuff too. It's one of those, again, you never want to turn down a dynamic wide receiver. And Dan basically said that on Tuesday as well. If there's a guy in free agency or a guy in the draft that we really like and is available, then we're never going to say no to that.
Right.
But it's not, like you said, it's not the highest number on the shopping list this year.
Those elite wide receivers that are out there going for 25 and 30 million bucks a year, I don't think that's the market they're shopping in right now. So,
and this is also not a wide receiver year necessarily in the draft. This is not one of those years where you're getting a Justin Jefferson, a Jamar Chase, and guys like that coming out. So you can afford to kind of say, okay, that's going to be on the back burner of our priorities right now.
One of the interesting things to me about that whole position is we've come full circle. Because when Bryce Young was drafted, one of the talking points was this guy's such a good distributor. He's so smart with the ball. He doesn't demand elite wide receiver talent around him, even though he had it at Alabama, to be successful. And, at the end of the 2023 season, a lot of people thought, well, yeah, he does.
Yeah.
And so they trade for Deontay Johnson, and that looked okay for a minute in training camp, then not so much at the beginning of the regular season. Then Bryce gets benched. And then by the time Bryce gets back in, Deontay's gone, and he's out there throwing to, and I say this with respect, okay? All of these guys are professionals, but he's throwing to old Adam Thielen.
Yeah.
He's throwing to old David Moore, who was a 7th-round pick, and at one point was the only drafted player they had on the field at that position. He's throwing to an undrafted rookie in Jalen Coker, and he's throwing to Xavier Leggett in and out of the lineup with some injuries coming down the second half of the season. So Bryce was fulfilling that prophecy from 2023 of he don't have to have that grade of guys to make an offense work. Now, will it help? And at some point in the evolution of an offense, would it be great to have one of those guys? Sure. I think specifically they need somebody who can run. They need somebody who can get down the field a little bit. Ted Ginn was the example during the 2010 Panthers teams of just straight line speed. Go get it. Fetch. And sometimes Ted caught it, sometimes he didn't. When he did, it was a big play. And having somebody with that kind of straight line speed is absolutely a need, but I don't think you've got to spend $30 million to get that kind of player.
Right. And you don't necessarily need it right now either because, as Bryce continues to evolve and kind of show what he can do, defenses are going to start playing him differently. Did he face a too high safety look at any point this year, really? Yeah. Not consistently. That's going to change over the next year or two. And that's when that need becomes a little bit more prevalent. But right now, what you need is a pass rush. And so it's like, do you spend your pass rusher money on a wide receiver that's not your biggest need?
Right.
I don't think that's smart football.
Yeah, you need a pass rusher. You need a Derek Brown size somebody to go with the Derek Brown size somebody who's rehabbing and working out back at the stadium right now as we speak. So
moving around, not on a scooter anymore.
Exactly. I loved when somebody asked Dan yesterday about Derek, and he's like, "How's he look?" He looks big. Yeah. That's how Derek Brown looks. He looks big. Breaking news. But anyway, it's going to be an interesting.
I was going to say, I always know the days that DB is in, which is a lot.
Yeah, pretty much all of them.
Because he's working out right now. Because he has a big Auburn tag and he has a big truck and he parks right there in the front. And I'm like, I guess when you're Derek Brown, you can kind of go where you want.
No doubt.
Both in life and on the football field.
Yeah. And like I said, they need to find him some friends, and I think they're going to. So we will be here. You and I are going to be here the rest of the week.
Yep.
I think our technical crew back here behind the cameras and behind the board, they're leaving in like 5 minutes. So I think they've got a plane to catch in a half hour. So they were good enough.
They said this has to be the happy half hour today.
Not a happy hour like the one we did with J.J. Jansen when you were at the Senior Bowl. But so we're going to get out of here. You and I will be here the rest of the week.
Yep.
Stay tuned to Panthers.com for all the latest from the Combine, and we'll see you when we get home.